Mr. Rainwater.
Hey there, Joe.
This is round 3 of talking about talking.
As soon as you said, I was like, I don't remember what we're supposed to be talking about. We're just here.
Tonight we're talking about the art of language, or
That's right.
choosing your words carefully. Not necessarily dialogue, but just words in general when you're writing, whether it's descriptive action, adjectives, in a case that I know you're going to bring up, advertising copy. Choosing the correct word is an art form in itself, because if you choose the wrong word, you could go the entire opposite way of your intention, even if that word is within the realm of, like, if it's a synonym. It could still fuck up everything very easily.
Yep.
And I've been wanting to talk about this for a while. I don't remember what spurred it into my brain as to use it for a topic, but the moment I saw you went on like a fucking Twitter rant, and then you did like a YouTube video on it.
What started it for me was, so this was last week, I think. I'm trying to find the picture because I can't quite remember the actual phrasing, but
something about a side hustle.
So Webtoon had done this series of posters that they were putting up, like in subways and stuff, for bigger cities, because they want to advertise their app and they're trying to get the word out. And most of them nobody has any issue with, but then there's this one that they put up that read something like literature's favorite side hustle. And they were trying to describe comics, right? And people such as myself are not even in my position. People who are like what are called like Webtoon's canvas creators. So Webtoon kind of has this thing where they have people like me who they call original artists. In other words, we have a contract with them to produce stories, and they pay for the stories we produce. The canvas artists are more like with YouTube, where it's just like you just upload it and it goes where it goes. There are a lot of artists who post stuff up on Webtoon, and they're not making a dime from anything they're posting because they're not getting the followers, they're not getting the the traction that they would need to get ad revenue. A lot of them got very upset with Webtoon about it, because they got upset particularly with the wording side hustle. Webtoon could have they could have done so many other different ways of saying what they were trying to say, but the fact that they called comics like literature's whatever they said, it was like literature's side hustle, basically. Those are the key words that you need to take away from this, right? To understand like what pissed everybody off. Because speaking from personal experience, it's not a side hustle. It's more than a full day job. It's, like I work probably 5 to 8 hours every single day, no weekends, and I make maybe minimum wage type pay. And we're talking about people who are like, a lot of these canvas people, they're probably doing, they get off of work and they maybe work 5 hours every night, right? And they're not making any money, and they're getting kind of called a side hustle. Like, you know what? I'm not making money from doing this. This isn't really a side hustle. This is a passion project. This is, calling. This is something I'm doing out of the, sincere desire. Get this accomplished. And so, Webtoon, and typical issues that happen with all corporations, issued an apology, and who knows if they're going to do anything else in regards to how they deal with this. They have their own issues they're kind of dealing with, trying to figure out how to have a better relationship with artists. But that is basically like, what for me sparked my original my video that I made in regards to that. So, like I said, my personal take on this is like, my personal take ultimately was like I was kind of not ironically impressed by Webtoon by admitting that their attitude towards this, because it's the attitude that all of these platforms sort of have, which is like, oh, this is a side hustle. If you make it work, you make it work. We're not here to decide whether or not you're going to be like, the next Stephen King or whatever, right? You got to figure that out. We're just building the marketplace. You have to bring the market to actually make that work. That's really frustrating, right? For a lot of people, that's really frustrating because they expect like, oh, I'm going to post things on here. I'll post my videos to YouTube and then I will be, then I'm rich or whatever. I get that YouTube money. But that's neither here nor there. The point is like, corporations are not going to like think with you specifically in mind. They're thinking about their audience. They are thinking about the producers. They're thinking about their ass that they have to save. So like when they're choosing wording, they're trying to think of it from multiple angles. And usually they're trying to think of it from an audience angle, right? They're trying to think of, it's difficult for me to fully understand what went through the mind of the person who did that, who like came up with the wording for that advertisement. But I'm guessing like part of their logistics was like, well, we're all talking about side hustles. That's the big thing. We're in the gig economy, blah, blah, blah. So let's make comics sound cool by calling it a side hustle. And like, that's not how you do it.
They just grabbed a buzzword out of the ether.
Yeah, because, this isn't fucking Lyft or Uber, right? Like, Lyft or if you do Uber, like you can get paid to do what you're doing very quickly, very easily.
Some people do that Lyft and Uber stuff as a side hustle, and some of them do it as like
straight up
their
job.
main hustle. Yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Same with DoorDash, same with a lot of those things.
Yeah.
Posting on YouTube or doing on a Webtoon is not the same thing because it is a total shot in the dark. It is an absolute shot in the dark whether or not you will make any money from doing it, right?
It's like going to McDonald's, buying a meal, driving to a random ass house, knocking on the door and says, "Do you want to pay $12.50 for this McDouble?" And someone being like, "No," and then slamming the door in your face, or going, "Yeah." That's kind of the equivalent of what a lot of people are doing. I get that. So when you're saying they got upset about the fact that it being a side hustle, they were upset about the fact that it's because my interpretation from everything was that side hustle was a demeaning, like a derogative phrase.
It's twofold. Literature's side hustle. So
right. Okay. I apologize.
This isn't literature. That's the first thing that they're mistaken. They're inadvertently saying, right? They didn't mean to say that.
Yeah.
But they're saying it's literature's side hustle and that it's a side hustle. So it's less important than literature, and on top of that, it's not even a real job. So
so it was two middle fingers and not just one. Okay. Yeah. I got you now.
Exactly.
That's interesting though that, I mean, we live in a world where you can tweet hello and 6 people will be offended on the internet. Like it's going to happen. But the weirdest thing is what words can upset people or send people in the wrong direction. Do you know what I mean? So like when I'm working on something, and this is one of the things that I've noticed a lot, I was doing a redraft of Terror House, the poster that's always hanging behind me. And one of the things that I had did at one point, because it wasn't resonating with people who had read Haunted as much as I wanted it to. And I thought to myself, well, something's wrong here. This is a short screenplay, and I got to reevaluate how efficient I am. So what I did was I stripped all of the dialogue out of the screenplay, and I rewrote it just descriptive actions. And I tried to think of pacing and really painting shot for shot what was happening in the actual story. Showed it to the same people. A little while later, they finally got back to me because it's hard enough to get somebody to read a script. It's almost damn near impossible to get them to read it twice. And they came back to me and they said, don't add dialogue. Leave it the way it is because right now it's perfect. I'm like, I'm fucking adding the dialogue back. Leave me alone. But everybody maintained that they had a better understanding of what was happening. And what I noticed was, while rewriting it, the words I were using were much more descriptive, but also succinct. Sentences did not drag on for giant paragraphs as they had with the dialogue. I was getting to the point quicker, and I was doing it more efficiently because I did not have dialogue to reveal certain things or say certain things. I just had to focus on the action and the meat of what was taking place in the scene versus whatever the dialogue was revealing. And it was very, very eye-opening to me that choosing the right words is a really big deal. Like, you know what I mean? Like, because when I write, especially for someone like me, I write my scripts that I shoot. I don't ever, it'll be a snowball's chance in hell the day I pick up someone else's script to direct and it's not my words on the page. So when I write something, I know what I want in my head and I'm just kind of scribbling something or whatever so people get a general idea when they're reading it, actors or whoever it might be, you know. And I'm not really going into what it's actually gonna be because I know what it is and that's all that fucking matters. When I realized, no, it doesn't. It really does matter what the other people are gleaming from what they're reading. And choosing better words is an important factor in that. And that was an eye-opening to me. So I was curious to know from you, when you're doing stuff, like you have editors, obviously. Do you have to submit scripts ahead of time before you've driven it? So it's all on you, okay.
Thank God. No, I mean, they definitely read over it and will ask me. I've never been asked to make a dialogue change other than to fix typos. That has literally been it. Like, I think there was one time I was given a recommendation, like, oh, it'd sound better if you put it this way, you know. But other than that, like, I pretty much submit to the editor a fully finished. I call it a draft, but it's a fully finished comic, basically.
Wow.
And then what they usually do is just give me suggestions on typos to fix. And then every once in a while, this almost never happens now, but every once in a while there's been some changes to like, maybe if you drew this panel this way or whatever, like added this or that in the background, this would read better.
You get more comments probably from readers, right?
Where
it's like, I don't understand what's happening here. Do you ever have situations like that?
Only from commenters. I've never really gotten that from editors. And you know, sometimes it's because the readers just aren't paying that much attention, but other times it's there have been a couple of times where it's been like a real legitimate,
not unanimous, but there was at least a fair chunk of readers that were in agreement about something. So when you have a situation like that, you've gone back and edited things before that have been released. You George Lucased a couple of things, correct?
Oh yeah, a couple of things here.
Are those the kinds of things that you've gone back and fixed, or have you left those things be?
No, I George Lucas some stuff. Like, for sure. Like, what's so sneaky about it too is anybody who comes on new, right? Like anybody who comes to read Trailer Park Warlock now will have no idea that there was ever anything else there. So it's like, it's not like with Star Wars where there was like the original print or whatever. Yeah. You know, there's no original print necessarily.
Nobody's downloaded it? Can you download the stuff from Save It?
That's possible, actually.
I don't think anybody's screen capping you, but you never know.
Yeah, nobody's screen capping, but they may have downloaded episodes, so it's totally possible.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, other than like the very first story I ever wrote that I put in print, like literally put in print, that's the only other like version of that, basically.
I think I have that comic book. Garage Raja?
You talking about? No, there is that, but then I also made a 16-page floppy of Trailer Park Warlock that.
Oh, I don't have that.
Yeah, I don't know if I don't think I made that many. I kind of gave some away, but a lot of them I sold at like.
I know I bought a Garage Raja, but I don't have a Trailer Park Warlock first edition.
Not yet. I can send you one. There's like 2 left.
I would actually take it, but I almost feel like I'm undeserving of it. I feel like somebody else should get that.
You give me the address after the end of this episode. And
Don't think that I won't take it. I am a hoarder, especially of collective type stuff. And Trailer Park Warlock is a great thing.
Yeah, you might want to hold on to it. Who knows? Yeah. Who knows what could happen, right?
Exactly. And yeah. Not that I would, but then as your friend though, I can't turn around and hawk it on eBay for like 60 grand or something, because that's fucked up.
I wouldn't care.
I would
use it to fund your next film.
My next film is going to be a lot less than 60 grand. I promise you that. But anyway, so we're going back to talking about the language part, and I'm curious to know, have you ever noticed like a language, like, so Tarantino, when he uses language, that's like a big thing. And I know you're a Tarantino guy.
Yeah.
Do you ever pull from some of the things from him? Like, cause I know for me, when I'm writing dialogue, if I really want to hone in on good dialogue, I will watch Aaron Sorkin stuff. A Few Good Men, Moneyball, Newsroom, earlier seasons of The West Wing, things like that, because that man has the dialogue that I love. But the way he chooses words and arranges them, to me, is so, it's stylistically natural. It's so weird because people don't talk like that, but when you watch it, you don't think that people don't talk like that, and it's a beautiful thing to me. So I'm curious to know from you, when you're choosing words, when you write stuff, are you just writing what you're hearing in your head? Like, are you talking, is it just Rainwater's style of speaking, or are you being more selective? Are you trying to be influenced by other things? How do you go about choosing words?
I definitely try and be selective, and try and also have a dialect for each character, right? Because it's very easy. I don't know. I've read a lot of comics where a lot of the time
they all sound the same.
Yeah, they all do sound the same, and it's because the writers just they're just blurting out what comes in their head immediately.
Yep.
And so it takes one aspect of depth from that character, right? Like, for me, it's like, I think very deeply about like how each character is going to talk and how that's going to reflect them from what, like the culture that they've grown up in, or like where particularly they're from in the world. And so it's very easy when you have like somebody who has more like a country accent kind of, or like a rural accent thing going on. But then you have to think more in depth when it's like subtle, when it's more subtle, right? Like I have 2 characters who are more like, they're basically like magical FBI agents. They're the only 2 characters that really talk with any sort of just like straightforward, like, this is just kind of my brain thinking, talking. And even then I try and make sure that they have particularities to their speech. Like, they're the only 2 characters in the story that ever like really say stuff like Jesus Christ or oh my God, or it's just kind of like more of a pinpointing to them having sort of a more conventional affect.
Worldview kind of. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. You don't really have to do a lot, I feel like, to create a depth in a character in the words that you choose. You really just have to choose a couple of particular, like maybe 1 or 2 things, in the way that it could be the way that somebody arranges a sentence, right? Obvious example is like Yoda, right?
Sure.
That was like, Yoda isn't saying anything particularly wild.
Wise. It just sounds wise because he says it backwards.
Exactly. It's just the way that it's arranged. Like, he's not using anything verbose or like crazy at all. Whereas, you compare that to, let's say somebody like Darth Vader, who like, he doesn't say a lot, but when he says something, it has a lot of impact because he'll talk about something that is very important to him. And so you get a sense that him as a character, he's completely engaged on what is the most first priority thing to take care of, right? You're never gonna hear Darth Vader. I mean,
There's no monologues. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And people play it up as like jokes because it's so obvious, right? Like, here's this character, here's what he talks about, here's what you expect him to say. And so, and within that range, also, there are particular words you're not going to hear Darth Vader say, right?
No.
He's not going to say anything fucking cute. It's just like not a thing that's going to...
Bubblegum lollipop. Yeah, it's not happening.
Is
and
that... Go ahead.
That's important when discussing language. You know what I mean? Is the words you don't say sometimes are the ones that the audience hears the loudest.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Like, it's like an off-screen character almost. So, that's interesting. I've done that a lot where I've gone in and I've, restricted things on rewrites where I've clearly overstepped the dialogue sometimes where it's like characters saying, oh, look over there. Whereas, they don't need to look over there, or they don't need to say that. When I've written in an action line, a tree branch breaks over to the left and every one of their heads look that way. No one needs to say look over there because the audience is like, it's just another speed bump getting your reader to where they want to go and where you want them to go.
Yeah.
And it's just unnecessary. I've noticed a lot that when I am doing action and dialogue, or not dialogue, action descriptive type stuff, I actually don't go too far into detail because that seems to be a problem with like the pros. You know what I'm saying? Like everybody like gets really flowery with their language and you just can't, you're already 10 steps ahead of them before they finish the sentence.
Yeah.
And that really drives me nuts when I'm reading other people's work. And that's why I found myself not doing it. And then I've gotten people say, well, I didn't know that the jack-o'-lantern had this weird, contorted thing to it or something like that. And I was like, oh, well, I didn't figure I'd bother you with it. And people are like, well, that's shit I need to know. You know what I mean? So I found myself over-censoring my language.
Well, that's a whole... Because you've talked about this before in the past because it almost is kind of a... As I've understood it with script writing, it's been kind of a rule that you don't go into too much detail about what's going on in the scene. But, there are things, especially in kind of what you're saying is like, if it impinges on the plot, right?
Yeah.
If it's something that directly impacts something that happens to a character, you got to make that detail known, right?
Right.
You got to make it known somehow, even if it's not, spending a page going on about it, right?
And that's really the thing is because you also have to keep in mind, I think I've brought this up before, but I use this analogy a lot when I talk to other people about their writing. It doesn't matter if you're writing a Christmas story and you are on page 1 and you talk about the snowflake lights that somebody has hanging off their house and this and that, it doesn't fucking matter if you wrote snowflake lights because the production designer and the director and to some extent the cinematographer, because that's lighting, are all going to be like, no, I don't want that. I want, LED multicolor lights. They're not going to be snowflakes. So it doesn't fucking matter because that's the thing about film making is very collaborative. However, if you write, inflatable Santa Clauses and snowmen line the lawn, and later on in the script, there's a scene where they're deflated during the day because the power's off, and it looks like a massacre where they've all been murdered and they're all like laying and draped over and stuff like that, and a little kid on a school bus breaks out crying. That's important to note. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, so in one instance, you would just write Christmas lights line the houses. That's enough. In the other instance, you have to write, Christmas lights and Christmas inflatables of characters line the lawn, and that's important. So it's important knowing. This goes also back to the setup and payoffs that we talked about in a past episode. That's really the crux of screenwriting, is that if it's there better be a reason for it, plot or character wise, later on.
Oh yeah.
Or even right now, for that matter. But that's the thing that I find that a lot of problems is that people a lot of writers come from things like novel writing or manuscripts and stuff like that. And that they live in the world where they are the production designer, the cinematographer, the director, you know what I mean? They do everything.
Novel writing sometimes can allow you to be indulgent. Although
it demands you be indulgent, kind of, if you ask me.
It depends, right? This is something that me and my friend Austin have been working through a little bit in regards to a book that he's writing, and co-writing with my dad, and it's a military action novel. So he was kind of having some issue with like the way that the prose was being written, because I think he was having concerns like maybe it was being too descriptive for and by that I mean it was so wordy that it actually dragged the action somewhat. And so I gave it a good think over, and I was just kind of like, well, how do you feel about it in particular? Because like here's the thing though, I've read Austin's work for forever, so I'm very used to it. So I might like it, but I'm hearing him kind of pick up on an intuition that he's having, right? And so he ultimately, like, he did another passover of the manuscript, and like he said, yeah, I've taken out about 10,000 words. So,
wow, that's crazy.
So I think, and he could be overdoing it, is the other possibility. But True. We'll see. We'll see when we read the next draft. So
that's a big thing in screenwriting, pacing.
Oh yeah, because it's a big thing in all. I mean, it's a big thing in all writing. I mean, I think there's a conception, sort of like what you were saying earlier, about how like you're encouraged to be as descriptive and go all out with prose, with novels, and it really depends on what you're writing. If you're writing something that's like very like ponderous and philosophical, and you're allowed to sort of linger on a scene, that makes a lot of sense. If you're writing like a sci-fi action book, you only really want to go into detail when it's important. It actually becomes more like, writing a movie script, where you just want to establish stuff and then let the story go. It is. I will say that it is one of the benefits, one of the reasons why you would want to write a novel over, writing anything else, is that you would have that freedom to just go all out. Like, it's one of the few formats where you're actually allowed to just go on for pages and pages and pages, however you want. And it's the only format where like somebody like a writer like Ayn Rand could get away with writing hundreds of pages about a philosophical treatise in the middle of like your emotional climax scene, basically.
Yeah. And that's important. That's important, but it still comes down to the words you choose, because it's the number one reason why I have not and will not read either Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones. I tried reading both of them. Can't do it. The words are too flowery. There's right off the bat in like the first chapter, they're using words to describe things, and I've never heard these words before, and I'm not getting an explanation. So I don't know if it's a made up word by the writer or if it's a word that I need to actually look up. But if I have to do another level of work, I'm not fucking doing it. Like, I'm just too busy. I have too many things on my mind.
Sure.
It's not that instance for me. So that is like a big hang up that I think a lot of writers don't consider, is especially in like the first 10 pages. Like, you really, like, I understand you want to set the tone, like, hey, this is a thick fucking book for a reason. But I think you got to ease into that sometimes, right? I mean, granted, I'm coming off like an R.L. Stein Goosebumps 6th grade reading level. Like, that's where I draw the line.
That's the thing, is like I read Lord of the Rings when I was like 13, and I didn't understand a lot of the words, but I just kept reading because my attitude was just like, well, I don't really know what that word means, but I'll figure it out later on as the,
Oh, no, I'm too impatient.
Given the context clues, right? Because here's the other thing. And this is kind of my issue with a lot of prose, is that a lot of the times, a lot of the words don't even fucking matter. like they become like background details to a sentence where it's like, why did he even need that word? He just put it in for whatever. It doesn't matter. You just kind of keep moving on. And to a certain extent, it sort of exhibits how good a writer can be, that you can have words in a sentence that aren't even necessary and the person could still pick up what's going on. I mean, there's so much shit in Lord of the Rings that I keep learning about that happened in the book that I don't even remember happening. Because it's that kind of a book where there's just a million things happening, both in the present and in the past, that it's dense. And so, I mean, it's a rewarding read for people who want to have something that they just want to study, right? Because you're bored of the Bible, basically. like that's kind of like, a lot of Catholics really get into Lord of the Rings for that reason, is because it kind of has that biblical structure to it, to where you get upon repeat readings, you get very fulfilling, like, little new details and metaphors that you didn't get previously.
That's interesting.
And so, like, that's why I get why people like Lord of the Rings and why people like books that are structured like that. But you have to be like full on fan, like full on nerd to get in that level. There's not a lot of like prose books I feel that way about. There's like one. And that's like the Illuminatus trilogy. Like, I'll go back to that book over and over again because there's like every read I find something new to get out of it. So
I don't have that kind of patience. If I read a book, I'm reading it once. That's just that. Like, I guess that's just, I don't know. I don't want to call it my style because that's.
But you do that with studying movies and stuff.
Basically. Absolutely. I watch a movie multiple times.
That's the thing. It's like, it doesn't matter. To me, it doesn't matter what the quote-unquote text you're using is, right? It's more it's the practice, right? Like,
okay.
Like, if the Bible were released as a 6 DVD box set, like, that's how people would have studied the Bible.
That's true.
Just rewatching their box set of the Old Testament over and over again.
Well, the movie theater is kind of my church. So I will allow it. I guess because I watch a movie and I watch it for different things each time. Like, I tried explaining to my wife the other night why I was watching Halloween on mute. She was like, "Why are you? You don't even have the captions on." I'm like, "I'm not watching it for the or for the dialogue right now." She's like, "What are you talking about?" Like, she didn't understand. I'm like, "I'm not watching for sound design. I'm not watching for dialogue. I'm not watching for the score. I'm watching for the lighting and the camera movements. And if I can remove certain distractions, then it helps, like me focus in on what I'm supposed to be doing."
I watched the newest Harry Potter movie in Spanish, and I didn't understand most of what anybody was. I mean, my Spanish is okay, but I didn't understand most of what anybody was saying. But I could figure out what was going on in the story well enough. And to me, it's a more of a study of like, okay, how well is the visual storytelling going for these?
You watched it in Spanish on purpose?
It was just on, like, I was at my dad's house and I was just like scrolling through the channels, and that was the only thing that was on that I was like vaguely interested. I wanted to see what was going on. And yeah, I mean, I've done that with a bunch of different things where I'm just like, I just want to see what this looks like, you know? And then it becomes a game of like, okay, can I just figure out what's going on in the story even if I don't understand?
I did that. Oddly enough, we're talking about the Bible and doing this, but I watched The Passion of the Christ.
It's a super visual movie too.
We watched it without the subtitles on, and because they speak whatever Arabic language that it was at that time, supposedly, the entire time. And it became more like a drinking game type thing where we were making up dialogue to joke about what they had just said and applying it to the situation. It was like a whose line is it anyway kind of thing. Made the movie a lot of fun. I can say that for the very least. But I mean, yeah, like the words that we were choosing, we were doing like bad Shakespeare. You know, thou, da 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 da, and it was adding a layer of texture to it.
Well,
it wasn't like we were like, "Hey, how you doing, Jesus? What's going on?"
I mean, and that's the other thing is like with the Passion of the Christ, that was an intentional choice made on the part of Mel Gibson because he wanted to try and portray an extremely realistic portrayal, or at least in his mind, realistic portrayal of those events in the Bible, right?
Right.
And he was just like, well, if we're going to do it realistic, they got to speak Aramaic. So that's going to happen.
Which is an interesting thing because I don't know if you saw this. This caught me by surprise the other day. I did not know that this was even a thing that was coming out. In August, on Disney Plus, they are releasing a new Predator movie. Yes. Okay, so you didn't know this either.
No, I didn't.
I was watching this because it's called Prey, right? It's not even. It doesn't have anything called with Predator. And if I had to ask you, what would you expect a new Predator movie is going to be about? Just ballpark, throw something in the dark. What would you guess?
Some random so-and-so gets caught up with being hunted by a predator and then manages to outwit the predator or teams up with the predator in some manner to hunt something else.
This is where it gets really interesting because this is why I think... I haven't watched this movie yet, and I'm already calling it perfect. The main character is a young girl in, I believe, an Apache Native American tribe.
Okay.
And it's about the predator hunting Native Americans in the wilderness. Like, back before America was discovered by settlers.
Okay.
They're releasing two different versions. One of them is in English, and the other one is in the native Apache. Again, I don't know if what tribe it actually is. I'm just saying that as a Native American stand-in. But to me, that's really fucking interesting. Not only is the premise great, you know what I mean? It's not just like some white guy in the jungle again, or Danny Glover on the streets of New York City. The entire landscape shift of the backdrop, you know, Native American girl, a young girl who's like learning to hunt to be a part of the tribe, is going up against the predator. Like right off the bat, I'm interested. And then the fact that you can watch it in the native language of that tribe
that's really
is even cooler to me.
Yeah.
Like that choice, not only did they, I'm guessing they did two takes. They did one in English and then they did another one. I don't think it's a dub. Or anything like that. That's got me excited. Like I legitimately want to watch it in the native version first. I don't want to watch it.
What's the movie gonna be rated?
Probably R.
On Disney
it has
Plus.
To be. It's a Predator movie.
I know.
Right.
I'm just like...
No, there's rated R stuff on Disney Plus now. They added
is?
in, because they folded in after they purchased 20th Century Fox.
Oh.
They have the rights to like Die Hard and like all these crazy movies. But what are they gonna do with them? So they put them on Disney Plus, and now like. There's like a warning that pops up before movies that like encourages parents to put on parental controls so that they can't do it. Which, by the way, I don't know if you've been watching the new Obi-Wan series.
I haven't.
Unbelievable. The finale episode yesterday, they had a disclaimer. They didn't say the word triggered, but they pretty much danced around the word triggered, that people would be upset about the content of the story in the episode versus traumatizing things represented in the episode. And I say that like I've seen things before where they're like, trigger warning, there's a rape scene 20 minutes into this show, or you know, there's a brutal curb stomping in American history, like trigger warning, blah blah blah. That kind of stuff, as much as I'm kind of against it, I get it. Like you're gonna warn people that they're gonna see things that might have, you know, open wounds on whatever experiences they've had in their life. But this was a vaguely worded trigger warning for like Star Wars fans, like, hey, we're gonna fuck some shit up with what you think Star Wars is. We hope you're okay after this. And I was watching it going, where the fuck is the thing that's supposed to be upsetting me? And I guess it was the fact that Obi-Wan
was it Jar Jar Binks?
No, but I guess it was the fact that Obi-Wan fought Anakin, or fought Darth Vader, and he cut his helmet open.
That's it.
I don't know. I gotta watch the episode again.
Was it Anakin's burnt face? Was
yes.
That supposed to be? I guess. For lack, I mean, pun not really intended. Scarring, like I don't.
Listen, I would have thought they would have had that disclaimer in front of the opening episode of this series because it was the same week right? I mean, maybe they didn't have time to do it.
Oh shit! I already know what you're talking about because it
The
opens up
school
with literally
shooting.
school shooting. Yeah.
Right, with Anakin storming is a flashback to Anakin storming the Jedi Temple and slaughtering all the kids. And I realized when I watched that, like it made it so apparent. I'm like, Jesus Christ, Anakin was a school shooter. That's fucking the Star Wars equivalent to what happened. Yeah. So I would have expected a disclaimer in front of that episode for that week.
That is weird. Gosh, that's a whole other thing in itself because to me, like, growing up, the rating system seemed to have some kind of a logic to it.
Yeah.
And has slowly, like, turned into, I don't know what the point of this is anymore because, like, I can't tell when we're going to say something is something you should hide your children's eyes from or not. Like, it's...
Right. Well, they're fucking boycotting Buzz Lightyear for a lesbian kiss. Like...
But there's a lesbian kiss at the end of the last Star Wars.
The Rise of Skywalker, whatever.
The one nobody likes.
Granted, that was like out of focus in the background for less than a second, whereas this was like two prominent characters on screen, just themselves, kissy.
Fucking kiss, like who cares?
I don't know. You know what it is, and this I've been wanting to say this out loud, but on Twitter, there's way too many crazy people, so I just keep my mouth shut sometimes. I don't think, in terms of the Lightyear thing, I don't think it's the issue that there's a lesbian kiss. What had happened was, and only the people at Disney know the truth of this, the lesbian kiss was in there. It got edited out.
Okay.
Now, there was talk that it was edited out because they didn't want to upset, like, Saudi Arabia and... other like very religious led countries.
There's so many layers to this too after like go on, sorry.
There's other talk that it was just that the kiss was inconsequential to the overall plot, so it was cut to make the runtime smaller, like with other cuts. Not just that one thing, but it was part of a slew of cuts. And internal Disney employees said that it was erasure and it was censoring LGBTQ representation and so on and so forth. So Disney put it back in. My understanding, or at least the way I'm understanding it, is if it had just had the lesbian kiss, they had never gotten cut for any reason whatsoever, it would not have gotten the backlash that it's getting, because I think the problem that a lot of people have is bowing down to the people that scream and cry about every little thing every time something happens.
Gosh, that's something that is a whole other topic in itself. Especially, I only want to touch on it lightly, which is basically like, when you've basically won the cultural battle, step back and let everything else work itself out. Like Disney was never like Disney's been on board with all that since forever.
I didn't follow it closely because I really don't try to get involved with that shit anymore.
Well,
because they were involved in the whole "Don't Say Gay" bill somehow.
This is why I was saying this goes deeper, because what happened was that I want to say it was the CEO of Disney.
Yep, Bob Chapek or something, whatever his name is.
Had a word with the state of Florida about the "Don't Say Gay" bill, and then the governor of Florida was basically like, well, we can just take away your tax status.
Right, because they got like tax-free for all of Disneyland, and then that shit went away. Yeah.
So my take from this is that, okay, now Disney is like oscillating because they're like, oh, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? We're now going to lose potentially a huge amount of our paying audience because of this stuff.
Yeah.
So they're either trying to like throw a bone to be like, okay, we'll take out the lesbian kissing thing because apparently that makes people feel upset or whatever. I don't know. My thing would be if I were at Disney, I just feel like just keep it in, just move on. Like,
right.
Forget about it. Like, we should have never had said anything. We should have just
keep on trucking.
Yeah, keep on trucking. Like, anyway, point is, and it's interesting because that kind of actually plays a little bit into our grander topic, right? Of like, how do you say something? What do you leave in? What do you take out? And I think that, I mean, ultimately, I haven't seen Lightyear. I don't know if
I haven't either.
I'm gonna assume that it's probably a decent movie, right? I don't know, but I've definitely been interested seeing the trailers because it looks fun at the very least. But like, um, I'm not impacted in the same way that a lot of people are impacted by the fact that like movies want to include more than just like straight white people doing straight white people things. Like that's I feel like that's just incorporating more of reality, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
There's plenty of room to have plenty of straight white people things happening in film and television. I do my fair share of it. Like, my point is like, when you open up the access to more and more people, you get more and more possibilities of expression, and therefore you get permutations in the field of art. You get permutations in society and culture. And so like, I'm ultimately like, I think you stated earlier, right, where it's just like, my issue is not at all with that it's happening. It's just like the way that sometimes it's executed feels very forced, or feels very like
I was thinking this the other day when I was watching commercials, where I have noticed, because I watch a lot of TV, that almost every single commercial now
has an interracial couple or
has
something
an
like
interracial
Yep.
couple, and I'm thinking to myself, you know, I know more gay people than I know interracial couples. Maybe it's me, but I would be more comfortable seeing, and it's nothing against interracial couples, but
I just want to amend what I'm saying too, because it's not just like couple in the strict sense of romantic couple. It's like two people of two different walks of life are in, like, they're not necessarily like they're friends, or like, you know, a black guy talks to an Asian guy about this.
There
and that.
are never, like, ever two white people on screen at the same time.
Yeah, no, we're done with it.
It just doesn't happen anymore. But see, here's the thing: is like that to me feels disingenuous, and because number one, white people, and I'm not saying this as like a supremacy thing. We are literally the dominant majority of.
Just numerically, you mean?
Yeah, like statistically, there are more white people than there are anything else in the United States. Not in the world, but in the United States. You know what I mean? Like that, like, and I get like representation is important. We should absolutely have diversity, but like it feels like it's gone a step too far, where it's like, okay, we can't have a white person in this ad at all. And I'm thinking to myself,
I mean, I don't think that that's the logic. I think the logic is. Go ahead.
The point that I'm making is that what I think you're about to say is that every company wants to represent different things, but when every company does that, all of the ads read the same way, and it just looks like it's one giant, and I'm using this word, agenda for like just to have that thing or whatever, and it feels like you're getting barrage punched in the face with the diversity push. And I think that's why a lot of people have issues with it.
This is like the Webtoon ad, right? Where it's just like, the way you're trying to word what you want is coming off you put it right. It's disingenuous towards what you're trying to do. I think it's also, I don't know. Like, I've been thinking about this a lot, because I'll watch commercial television when I'm in the gym, so I've noticed it too. And it's one of those things where I'm like, okay, like this is the new Inception horn, basically, for advertising, where it's like, this is the trend we're going to go with. We're going to make sure that we're casting like a cornucopia of identities for our commercials, because we don't want to just have it be white people on parade. That's not going to reflect well on us culturally, socially. It's a matter of money, right? Because I think it's the Michael Jordan quote, Republicans buy sneakers too. And that's not necessarily pinpointing on Republicans. It's just saying the people that you might have an issue with as a consumer, that doesn't matter to a company or a business, because they are trying to reach as many people as possible to sell their product. And I think the assumption is that white people will buy any old shit. We need to market to everybody else. And that's like that actually makes sense to a certain extent to me. Like, that makes a lot of sense, because it's like, if you're a company, particularly like, let's say Coca-Cola. There is an issue with Coca-Cola in certain people in the black community. There have been some history with Coca-Cola, like, I can't remember the exact details of it, but like a lot of black community is very Pepsi centric for reasons having to do with Coke's past racism. So if you're Coca-Cola, you're going to try and be like, okay, we know white people will drink our shit. So how do we get somebody else, right? How do we get the black community? Well, you see a lot of Coca-Cola commercials where there's more people from the black community drinking Coke, right? Who knows if that actually breaks through in advertising, but the logic to me makes sense. If you're an advertiser, you're only like, okay, we want to bring in new demographics to buy our product.
Right.
And like, it all sounds very cynical the way I'm saying it, because it is very cynical. It's an extremely cynical sort of industry where they think very precisely in this way of like, how do we get more people to buy more of our stuff? And so, I mean, going back to sort of your original point, it seems disingenuous because it is disingenuous, and everybody knows it's disingenuous, and that's...
Except for the people that complain. Because the people that complain think that it's actually making some kind of a difference. And, you know, we don't have access to their internal numbers of Coca-Cola to see if it's working, but they do continue to do it, which leads me to believe they would not be spending the money if it wasn't working.
Right. No, exactly. And I think that that's to the point, is like, it must have some sort of effect. And like I was saying earlier, just on an odds, like if you're looking at this from an odds point of view, a point of view of like, well, we've got 100% of this one demographic. There's no reason to put any effort or money into getting them. We need to like shoot for other, and you know, maybe the odds aren't in our favor, but it's better than nothing. And why would we want to waste our resources?
Yeah.
You know,
preaching
on
to the choir.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So like, I think that has been also sort of the long view for a lot of corporations that adopt sort of the diversity thing, is like, long view is we want to bring more people to buy our stuff.
Right.
And, you know, at the same time, making our customers feel like they're morally better people. That's the part that I have a problem with. I have an extreme problem with the idea of commerce being used as a mode of like moral justification, because at the end of the day, all the people who are selling you this they don't give a fuck about the morals behind it. They just know how to play you like a sucker. And so
they slap a rainbow on their logo this month. And
exactly. Target, you know, Target does their Pride Month stuff and they make a shit ton of money, but it never changes the course of anything. So like,
right. Well, I think it's more so now it's about, you do it so you don't get accused of not supporting it. Do you know what I mean? Like if there's a company, like all the companies right now have the rainbow embedded into their logo. And it's almost like if now you did not put the rainbow on your logo, somebody on Twitter is going to say, well, McDonald's didn't do that. They must not support Pride Month or whatever. And then one tweet gets retweeted 500,000 times and it becomes a thing. So now you do it so it doesn't go that direction. Everybody knows it because like everybody's seen the meme where it's just a collection of company logos that are all draped in the rainbow. Like that's a common thing on Twitter now or Facebook or wherever you get your memes. So I think like now it's to the point where everybody knows it's a disingenuous move by the company, but that representation is still there. But if you don't do it, that's the bigger thing where it's like, oh, McDonald's didn't do it or Nike didn't do it or whatever the company may be. And then all of a sudden people start asking, well, are they homophobic? Are they Chick-fil-A 2.0? Are they donating to LGBTQ, charities? Are they da-da-da-da? And they start digging. And so it's kind of like it's a shield for a company.
I will say that I think we can confirm that the trend will have shifted when we see Chick-fil-A
they did
raise the pride flag. Really? Like
I think
Chick-fil-A
they did. I think they put the pride flag on their logo or something like that. Then they tweet something and somebody was like, "Yeah, nobody's buying this."
Well, I'll be damned.
I'm Googling. Keep talking.
Well, so anyway, like it's one of those things where for me it's just like it's confusing because I generally like human beings regardless of like where they come from in life and whatever their situation is. Like I don't care. I want people to be happy and enjoy the things they do. What I don't, like I said earlier, what I don't enjoy is sort of the aspect of it where now people make it a point of holding it over other people morally that they didn't do whatever, like do the thing that is the quote unquote conscientious thing to do or whatever. Like I think we're sort of out of the worst of that in a grander cultural sense. Like, especially with I don't know, like hearing all the story with the Lightyear stuff, I'm kind of like, okay, I guess people don't care about it as much as they used to, and shit changes fast, right? Like, it's one of those things, and that's the other part is like, I'm kind of concerned that because of the way like all of the diversity stuff became a trend, that it'll only be looked at as a trend 10 years from now.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be 10 years from now, like, watching commercial television while I'm at the gym and being like, oh, we're back to two white guys talking about their power tools. Like, what happened to the good old years when it was, like, you know, like a black guy talking to an Asian guy or whatever. Like, or it was, like, two women talking about power tools or whatever. Like,
yeah,
that's gone. And that would make it only this very distinct, unique point in history that would, I think, work against the original intention. So, like, that's my concern, is because the intention comes from a good place.
Yeah.
It's the execution that's so completely baffling.
Yes.
That's where I get discombobulated by it. That's the only proper way that I can put it.
Well, that's what a lot of things get, where things get botched, is in the execution. You know, how many movies have you gone to where you're like, that trailer had a really great premise, that movie did not live up to that premise, or they did not take full grasp of the potential of that premise. And I think that's really the problem of it. And that happens when you have groupthink. And I'm not saying that like towards the Twitter. I'm talking about like company, like studio mindset, where there's like 12 people in a table and they're all second guessing each other. And it's great to be in a box as an artist because it forces you to get creative. But when you are in that small a box, it's just important to breathe. Yeah. And that's where I feel like a lot of that stuff ends up going, where it's like, well, if we have two black people, one of them's got to be a lesbian. One of them, you know what I mean? Like, we only have 30 seconds to sell Clorox. We need to get as many in. We need to get, as they called them in that TV show 30 Rock, twofer, where it was like a black guy and a gay man in one. And they called him twofer because he fulfilled two quotas. And that's kind of the mindset now, I think, where corporate people are going. And while that works on the check boxes, right, it doesn't fulfill the realistic world view, because I'm not saying there aren't black lesbians or anything like that. I'm just saying that, you know, I don't know if they're looking at statistics of the LGBTQ breakdown of how many, you know, like, is the ratio of gay men to lesbians 6-1 or the reverse of that? You know what I mean? Are they looking at the known statistics of how many people of color are LGBTQ? Like, are they factoring that in when they do things? Because if I'm watching a TV show or an ad or whatever, and I see two white guys, but they're gay white guys, I'm not relating to them. You know what I mean? Like, so I'm wondering if they're considering stuff like that.
Here's the other thing is, you know, the size of a demographic may not matter as much if the money's good. So, like,
true. As long as it's working. If it's not broke, don't fix it kind of mentality. And that's probably 100% the way they're going about it. I do want to correct myself before we go forward. Chick-fil-A did not drape their logo in the pride flag. They completely just kind of ignored Pride Month entirely. So, but I thought they were done with that thing. Maybe I just saw some fake news on the internet a couple years ago.
Did I ever tell you about in my drawing and storyboarding class? My professor had talked with us about sort of there's this idea about how you market Saturday morning cartoons, and the idea was you don't market them to boys. You market them to like the young girls, because the boys are not discriminating. They will watch any old shit. They will buy any old toys. They don't care. Like they just want to watch things happen on the TV. Girls, on the other hand, are extremely discriminating, and they have very particular needs that they want from a cartoon or from a television show.
No, I have not heard this.
So the idea he was talking about, the idea is when you're pitching a story, think about it from the perspective of trying to pitch it to a group of young girls, because they're the ones that the executives are trying to aim at, because they're the ones that are going to be the audience that they're going to have a harder time getting to watch the show. So I think this is kind of going into that logistically. Like, once again, and I've kind of said this already a couple of times, like, straight white people will watch any old shit. Like, that's
straight white guys.
Straight white guys in particular will watch any old shit.
That's fair.
We'll watch reality. We'll watch The Bachelor.
Well, I'm not watching Fire Island right now, so that might not be entirely true.
We'll watch, whatever dumb soap operas on TV if it happens to be on and we don't have any other choice.
Wrestling.
But like you're saying, like, women are more discriminating in regards to what they're going to watch, and then just go through the intersectionality of that, like. If I'm trying to figure out where to start. Like, if you're a black lesbian, you're gonna have a much more discriminating, like, things you're gonna factor out, right?
That's so interesting to me, because I never thought anyone would think like that.
You're probably gonna be a lot less interested in watching two straight white guys talk about straight white guy shit, like, just on a odds basis. I'm not saying any kind of essentiality, just like on an odds basis, you're going to be more interested in watching black related television, or you're going to be more interested in watching lesbian related television. So those are, like, Home Improvement is probably going to be a show you're not that interested in watching. So you kind of have to look at it from that sort of, I'm talking about this from executive mind, by the way.
Yeah.
That's a whole other different way of thinking that I don't particularly like, but it exists. And it exists very specifically right now, like, in this sort of diversity mindset. Because, like I said, all these companies are trying to figure out, like, what is our market's kind of imploding because of streaming, right? Like, the whole field of art is changing, where people are making millions of dollars just posting random videos on YouTube because they appeal to a very specific targeted audience.
Yeah.
Or they appeal to some sort of way of marketing a story or doing entertainment that we've never done before in the past. Because it turns out that people really just like listening to people talk ad nauseum about whatever, or play video games or whatever. Yeah. So, like, there's suddenly this moment that I think a lot of executives are going through where they're having a crisis. They don't know how to make money anymore because they can't just pump out Die Hard. Like, it isn't like making the bucks like it used to. So what we're seeing, I kind of like to describe it like a shop. They're just trying whatever they can to find what works, what doesn't work. They're gathering data. And after the deck is shuffled, you're going to see sort of like a new trends occur from that. So, once again, this goes back to sort of my cynical take on it. And that's the thing, is I don't want it to be cynical. Like, I watch Everything Everywhere All at Once has like a lesbian relationship in it. And it's done so well because it's done in a very genuine way, where it's about, like, the daughter character is really worried about how, like, her mom and her grandfather perceive her as coming out, basically. And it becomes a very important part of the story. It doesn't take over the story, but it's there in such a way that that it's emotionally not just important to the daughter character, it's emotionally important to the mother character. It's emotionally important to the way that she's trying to figure out how to talk to her daughter about it. And it's incredibly well done. Like, it doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel like maudlin. It doesn't feel like it just feels like it's done right. So to me, going back to what we keep saying, is just about execution and how well you do it. So
language, choosing the right words. It really comes down to efficiency and authenticity. I think that's really the crux of language, and I think that's what we've really been talking about as a subtext here for the last 20 minutes with this kind of tangent that we went on. But I do feel like it falls within the topic that we've started out to discussing. Is just, choosing the right things requires a good deal of research, but there's also, a factor, and I don't want to get into this because we're wrapping up, but writers tend to be more observational than people. Do you know what I mean? Like the quote unquote normies. And I feel like a writer, their observation trumps any statistical fact that you find out there. You know what I mean? Like, writers can see through they can cut through numbers and see the truth of something. And it's just one of those things where I feel like a writer needs to trust their instinct and their own experiences. But, it's important to do research, but then, factor in your gut as a contributing factor, as just as authentic, if you are a good writer, which, if you have not noticed that you are more observational, then you're probably not all that observational, and that's a bad thing for a writer. But when you start noticing that about yourself, that you're observational, that's when your observational has just become, it's doubled up on itself. That's important. And I think that's what really comes down to, is choosing the right language, whether you're talking about words or you're talking about the stories that you're telling, the language of cinema, the language of comic books, the language of dialogue, the language, whatever. It really comes down to being selective and being efficient and really being authentic. I think authenticity is the number one thing that any audience wants. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's one of the reasons why there's always outcry about, not necessarily like whitewashing, but it's in that same crux where, like a capable actor plays a handicapped person, that people get upset about that. And it's like, well, this is make-believe. This is pretend. This is an acting job. But people want that authenticity. They're like, what? There wasn't an actor that had a disability that could have done that role? And that's what it really comes down to. What you have to observe as a writer, as a storyteller, as a creator, when you're telling your language, authenticity is the number one thing. You have to make your audience believe what is happening is real. That's what they want. And I think that really comes down to the main point about, the takeaway for this episode. It's when you are choosing your language, that's what you really need to boil it down to. Is this authentic? Is this the right thing? Is this real?
Yep.
And getting across the intended information. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but that's pretty much what I've taken away from our conversation this evening.
100%. Yeah, authenticity is definitely, and also I think that comes, something that I always like to hit on is just like, when you're creating your work, make sure you work primarily from your first person experience, because that is where you're going to get the most jewels and the most gems in terms of, like, how you talk about the world and how you talk about what's important to you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we will wrap up this wonderful episode. I want to announce something that I completed. It's either yesterday or today, but we are now streaming on Amazon Music Unlimited.
Woo!
Which is kind of cool. We were not on there for the longest time, but they've more recently in the last couple months started integrating podcasts, and I've been dragging my feet on figuring out how to get ours on there. But our entire library is now on Amazon Music. So if you use that as your primary listening thing and you want to add us every Wednesday when our new episode drops, it will be on Amazon Music Unlimited, in addition to Apple Music, in addition to Spotify, in addition to YouTube, in addition to Anchor and all those weird podcast things that I'm not entirely sure anyone uses, but we are on just about everything. So if that makes it easier for you to listen to us, please check us out and subscribe on Amazon Music. You can again, go back and listen to the entire library, or you can check us out wherever you're currently checking us out. It's all good. But we just figured we'd throw that out there for anybody that was preferring that we be on there. Because personally, me on there, I like talking to my Echo Dot and telling it to play a podcast. And now I can tell it to play us. I don't know if it'll work. I haven't even tried that out. But Alexa. Oh, it's unplugged. Never mind. I unplugged it to plug in my ring light for the video for YouTube. I'll test it out later. I'll let you guys know next week. Anyway, thank you guys for tuning in. We will talk to you next week. Good night.
Good night.